Firstly, thank you all very, very much for coming along to this first office hours. The team at Canonical are really kind of excited, but at the same time still trying to find our way. We know where we want to get with the Academy and why we wanted to start it, and it's very much our initiative. It's not some, corporate plan to farm people's writing for AI models or cheap labor for writing documents. This is something that a lot of us feel really passionate about. A lot of us have been involved in open source software and Linux for a long time, and we understand how difficult it can be. It can be to kind of build up the confidence to get involved with open source projects, but also difficult in many ways to get involved with documentation and build your confidence behind writing and making contributions to documentation, because the documentation itself, the art of creating documentation or the practice of documentation is sometimes quite different to what people expect it to be. And it's difficult without real world experience to kind of make that transition from what you want, what you think it might be, to what it actually is. As brilliant and as fun as it is, which I think is why a lot of us are here. And there are actually quite a number of technical authors from Canonical here. The company as a whole now must have about 16 or 17 technical authors, and we're still growing. So we do actually find ourselves in a very lucky or fortunate position to be able to have this cohort of technical authors across all the kind of open source projects that Canonical works on. With this, all of us are really keen to kind of make this contribution and help people get on board with documentation and hopefully improve open source documentation and practice and be able to share these ideas more widely. And this is really what the Documentation Academy is about. I personally, a little bit of background information and maybe on how the technical authors work at Canonical. We all work on individual engineering teams. So usually our managers are the engineering managers for those teams. So I'm lucky enough to work on the Snap packaging team. So my engineering manager is the person responsible for Snapd and the Snap packages. And I'm also, that's very related to Ubuntu Core and all the build tools associated with that. But we have people here from Launchpad and the Ubuntu server team, from Kubernetes team, from secret projects that haven't been announced yet. So we're all kind of in these, we work very closely with the engineers, and this is usually where the kernel of documentation comes from for us. But because now we're quite a cohort at Canonical, we also have a lot to do with each other. Daniela Procida, actually, who's here, runs that kind of macro aspect of what we do in terms of documentation practice. So we do have this opportunity to be able to kind of go from this low-level product documentation that a lot of us work on, working together to create and formulate kind of ideas around improving documentation, and also hopefully reach out to the community and people who want to kind of help with open source. So the idea behind the Open Documentation Academy, it is doing it at Canonical because we have this availability of technical authors and projects. But it's the idea behind it that we're so enthusiastic about, in that we can create issues or tasks that we know none of us are necessarily going to have the time to look at in the next 6 months, but we know are equally important. Things that are suitable for people outside of our direct teams to kind of look at and hopefully accomplish. Although having said that, many of the ideas aren't fully thought through, because to think them through is something we often don't have the scope for, and that's part of technical authoring. But to come up with a body of these tasks that we can kind of curate, at the moment put as issues in the GitHub repository that's associated with the Academy, and then for people who may be interested in collaborating or writing documentation, to take one of those issues and with us see those issues through to completion. For those people who take the issues, we really want to recognize their contribution, not just in the fact that their work will be merged and recognized within the projects that they're working on, but we haven't fully fleshed this out yet, but we really would like to recognize them in more significant ways than that. I mean, it could be, you know, swag, but I mean, it obviously helps them with their resumes, it helps them with the way that their GitHub profiles are presented, but also in more formal ways, although we've not really discussed that. And actually, I should say a lot of the Documentation Academy is to be decided, and we aren't necessarily the ones who want to decide it. We'd love to decide it as a community with everybody who wants to get involved and kind of create this together, so that we can, honestly, from a personal level, kind of copy this model and take it to other places. I've had several people from other communities outside of Canonical and Ubuntu already get in touch to say that they'd love to do something similar, and would Canonical consider you know, incorporating projects outside Canonical. And from my perspective, that's absolutely yes. So I'd love for us to come up with a template that could be used elsewhere to, you know, to help people get on board with open source, but also to help documentation as a practice. I'm going to ask one of our technical authors, Artem, to go through one of the processes in a minute. But just before I do that, I will say where you can find us most of all. And I was going to share my screen, but it's probably not necessary if I put the links in at the end of it, because it's quite good to see all your faces. But I think we anticipate the main kind of to and fro of asynchronous kind of conversations, as people like to call it, will be on the discourse forum. That's where we've kind of currently got a very brief getting started guide, where you'll find links to the office hours, where we plan to schedule these office hours, and come up with a calendar of themes and kind of events related to that. And it's also why I hope people across different time zones will be able to ask questions and get feedback, and everybody kind of shares in the community in that way. I think discourse, it may not be great for documentation, but it's great for, you know, discussion. And I think it's a great piece of software for that. For the synchronous conversations, we're actually on Matrix as well. I'll put the link in. All these links are on Discourse. They're also on the GitHub repository. And the GitHub repository itself, just this week, I kind of fleshed out the README that goes alongside that. That could do with a lot more work, but the README does explain some of the ideas behind it briefly. It also documents some of the different types of tasks we envisage, and it provides all the links to all of this information. And while all of this is public, there's also an email address that will go to us as technical authors at Canonical. If people aren't comfortable with all of this kind of public engagement, then I strongly encourage people to email us, which is docsacademy@canonical.com. So on the GitHub repo, which is basically, this isn't ideal, and we all recognize this. The GitHub and Git in general does require a certain amount of effort to get involved with, and we'd like to be able to kind of remove that mental burden for people to get involved. But to start things off, it just seemed the simplest place to start. Certainly when we want to try and automatically generate issues in the GitHub repository that we hope people will work on, but also as a central place for people to kind of see the work is being done for the Academy, to review the work that's being done as issues, and also I think ultimately to host all the work that's being done for the Academy, so people can share this and also copy it or fork it and do what they want with their own ideas as they take that elsewhere. So if Artem, if you didn't mind, maybe you could go through what we kind of envisage the process to be if somebody's interested in taking on one of the tasks at the Academy. Artem's one of our technical authors, sorry.
Thanks, Graham. Unfortunately, I cannot share my screen right now because I need a permission to do that. So I would ask you to do and go ahead and grant me that. Meanwhile, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Artem, just like Graham mentioned. I'm also a technical author for Canonical, and I was going to talk through the way. Oh, I'm a co-host now. That's grand. Talk through the ways of dealing with this GitHub repo. It's listed among the links Ram is about to share or already did share. I don't know. Here's the README. In short, it's a vision of the way to interact with the broader community to provide some sort of a direct communication channel with people from all over the world, the open source community, as we as we call it, by providing them some means to raise specifically documentation issues and documentation related issues with us as a collective. Again, not with Canonical in general, because that might not work. But again, and probably learn something useful in the process. Uh, I want to apologize in advance because something I will be talking about is very much a thing in the making, so it may change in the future. But again, it's sometimes just better to get the ball rolling first and then maybe strip the unnecessary parts. So, long story short, uh, here's the main exchange mechanism. You can see just the regular GitHub issues because it becomes quite natural, I believe, for most of the people who deal with open source and coding and documentation in general. And here, the important part is here you can see some issues listed for canonical products, canonical specific products such as LXD or Snapcraft or Snap or whatever. But we also raised some meta issues like the issues for the academy itself and so on and so on. Some starter pack, which is also an internal project led by Red Fox, uh, also a technical author here. The important part here is you can bring your own issues just as well. For example, if, like, for example, Roland here, you have something to discuss about Thunderbird documentation, please create an issue, please join, and there you will be able to maybe invite some expertise from us, first of all, as fellow technical authors, and from the general community who's interested in all of this. So if you want to participate, you can do two things. First, you can create an issue, or you can just assign yourself to an issue or ask to be assigned. So let's just pick something random. Okay, here we have an issue created just a few minutes ago by Robert, who is also present here. So a good issue description will provide some background of what it is, what's the problem, what needs to be done, possible outcomes, some prerequisites. We also are working on the labeling framework that will enable you to judge the severity or the complexity of the issue by the tags it has. For example, we have the proverbial good first issues and so on and so forth. The main idea here is to provide all the details you consider relevant for someone absolutely initially foreign to what you are bringing to the table, to take this on and engage it in a meaningful manner. So just a few examples. For example, you can deal with this. Oh, that's a good example. So here we have a background, some prerequisites, some external links to style guides or contribution guides. Well, pretty much obvious. And what you can do is, I think, well, something like this. You just come here and, oh, I believe Usman is present in this meeting as well. So here you just sign up, you volunteer, and then you engage in the conversation, first of all, with the issue starter, and everybody else who joins the conversation. obviously, the main goal of this academy is not to get huge amounts of work done. So it's probably not the best idea to bring daily routine or mundane tasks just to get them done, because you don't have enough time. But instead, anything you can't quite wrap your head around, anything that you may consider useful or interesting, or maybe too problematic to be done all by yourself, please bring it here and have a discussion with fellow technical authors, because I can only speak from my personal experience, my previous experience. One problem of writing documentation for open source projects is uh, that the people who do that are mm, probably assigned to this work as a form of punishment, first of all, but otherwise, uh, the problem is getting siloed, because all too often you have to act alone, which is probably the worst part of this experience. And here, what we're trying to do is to maybe break this barrier. So I'll probably stop by now.
Thanks,
So
Martin.
thank you.
Thanks, Martin. That was really useful. I'll just say a few more things. The documentation office hours, we'd love to do this every week. It's ambitious, but with a similar kind of format where we spend a chunk of the hour, like, I don't know, maybe having a debate or sharing some kind of insight, talking about documentation news or kind of broader industry trends, or looking at tools, those kind of things with a different theme in every documentation office hours. And then, of course, providing a forum for people who may want to ask questions about documentation in general, or the academy, or even documentation at Canonical and the Ubuntu products that we look after. We'd all, of course, be happy to do that. I just thought I'd introduce Daniele Procida, who may want to say a few words. He's basically directing us all.
Oh, thank you. I'll say hello. It's really nice to see all these faces and names, some of whom I know from outside Canonical. And so thank you, Graham, for kicking all this off and putting all the effort into it. I think it's really exciting, because I think I'm like many of the people here. I got into software and open source through documentation. It was a life-changing pathway for me, and it was quite a long path. And what we want to do here is share that with some other people and do it in a structured way, so that you always have a next step to take. So the reason that, as Graham says, that we're using Canonical as the target for any work you do is that's because that's what we take care of. That's where we can help you. It's not that we're looking for laborers to work on Canonical or even open source Ubuntu documentation. It's rather that this is the place where we can set certain standards and help people understand those standards and help them improve their skills. So we want people to come into this and become good or better at documentation, or good or better at working with software products. And because it's Canonical, because it's Ubuntu, the things that you do are recognized. Some of you might end up making contributions, starting making small contributions to products that are used by hundreds of thousands or even millions of people. So that's one of the things that we can do. We can amplify your contributions. So this is genuinely for you, for people in the open source software community, and also in the documentation community, because we want to lift that community up a little bit to elevate its the understanding that other people have of it. It's doing documentation is a difficult job sometimes. There are lots of things to know and learn, and we want that to be understood. So I hope that you and people after you are going to come into the academy and help us understand it, help us understand the needs that there are out there, and give you something really meaningful in return for the time you spend with us. So I'm looking forward to see what the next months bring, and I really hope we'll see your faces and names in subsequent meetings like this. So it was really lovely to see Usman's comment on one of those issues already, and I hope there's more of that. I hope that there are enough of us to keep up with the demand and help people along. But this is a fantastic thing to be part of. So thank you, Graham, and everyone who's here.
Thanks, Daniela. In fact, I've asked a few of the technical authors beforehand if they'd mind if I introduce them. So this might be a good chance to introduce just a few of us who work at Canonical on documentation. I have asked a few beforehand. If I'll pick out a few names, and maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourselves, or a little or as much about yourselves, and perhaps what you're working on and what you're interested in. I might start with Nick Veach, if you didn't mind saying something, Nick.
I suppose not. Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Veach. I've been working on documentation at Canonical for over 10 years. If you've ever had any problem with the documentation in the past, it's not my fault, though. It was some other people. I'm really excited about being part of this project. I think that documentation is something that is not done to the best standards in open source as a whole, and there are reasons behind that, and we'd like to play a small role in changing that. So that's why I'm involved. I work on the Kubernetes docs currently at Canonical, if that makes any difference to anybody, and I think that's probably enough.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Sorry for putting you on the spot. I don't know, Kitana, would you like to say anything? Kitana's another one of our technical authors.
Sure, thanks, Graham. So, hi everyone, it's great to see you all. So, I'm Kirtana. I have been at Canonical for a little more than a year. I've had my fair share of experience with documentation prior to Canonical, but I think the experience at Canonical gives me exposure to open source, and the documentation has been really great so far, and the Documentation Academy kind of aligns with that. Yeah, that's about it.
That's perfect. Thanks, Kitana. Dimple, would you mind if I introduce you as well? Dimple's here as well, another one of our technical authors.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Dimple. I've also joined about a year back. I don't really have a technical author background, but I'm really enjoying my time here. It's a great combination of learning new stuff and being able to write it and work with a lot of people, and at the same time not have weird deadlines from clients. So it's really nice experience here, and I'm looking forward to working in this open documentation academy. I hope to help, and I hope to learn a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dimple. And Robert is another technical author, an industry veteran, I dare say. Do you want to introduce yourself, Robert?
Hello, thank you. I want to preface that this is a project that really excites me. It's something that really goes to the sort of community open source roots of what I consider to be the main motivation force for me and others as well to be involved in this industry, as you called it. I've only joined Canonical last year in September-ish, I believe. But I've worked on various documentation projects and been involved with open source documentation for a very long time. And to reiterate, this is exactly the kind of stuff that I would expect an open source company such as Canonical to be doing. So I'm very glad to be a part of a project like this. and I hope it can, for whoever is going to be joining, go a long way in introducing open source and the spirit of the community work, as well as the contributions to the open source way of developing stuff.
Thanks, Robert. Do you mind, Andrea, if I introduce you as another technical author at the company? I don't know if you want to say anything.
Sure. I mean, I'll keep it quite short. I'm also pretty new, so I don't have that much to say yet, but I'm working with the data platform team. If you have ever seen any charms related to databases, then I'm working on those docs. And yeah, I guess I'll just say that one of my favorite things about this job and the reason why the reason why I like it so much is that it allows for working on technical writing in the classical sense and writing and testing out technology that I enjoy, but also it always leaves space for thinking about documentation practice, how things should be done, or not necessarily how things should be done, because there's never an answer for that, is there? But it's this, this mixture of, we got to get work done, but let's also give it some thought, change the way things are done, help each other. I don't know. And I think this academy really encompasses all of that. So like Dimple said, I'm excited to help, but also to learn a lot by being involved.
Yeah, me too. Me too. There is an element of making it up as we go along. Artem, last but not least, I should have introduced you before on the projects you're on, but do you want to say a little bit about why you're here and how what you're working on?
Oh, the first part is very, very simple because you invited me to. Sure. Okay, anyway, just like I mentioned before, my name is Artem. I come from a very different background because I spent almost 10 years working on corporate documentation in a slightly different capacity as a localization specialist and manager. After that, I joined Nginx as a technical writer and spent almost 5 years there, which was an education in itself. And I believe this is our back to talking about the academy and its goals. I believe personally that this is our chance to tackle a very resilient issue in the open source community, because if you go out there and ask for advice for studying author or for anybody who wants to work on anything open source, the advice you usually get is, okay, join any kind of open source product, just suggest to write some docs for them and they will accept you. Well, I dare you try. That usually raises all kinds of problems with people. And here we do something that, well, probably was done before, but something that is a way to counteract that maybe lingering negativity, to be straightforward. We actually invite people to join us and work on some issues. We are willing to guide them and mentor them and help them and so on and so forth.
Thanks, Artem. And I think it can't be emphasized enough that we haven't kind of created it yet, and we're adaptable and we want it to be adaptable and kind of mold it into what we all kind of want it to be.